All right, welcome back in Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall, a live look at Gaza, the time, Israel Standard Time, about 5:10 in the morning. Let's talk about President Trump's plan for peace relating to the Gaza War. Hamas is reviewing President Trump's plan to end the war. The plan was presented yesterday during Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's joint speech yesterday. Netanyahu saying if Hamas doesn't accept the proposal, then Israel will, quote, finish the job. Dr. Alon Burstein is here. Alon is the host of the Israel-Palestine report on YouTube. Always good to see you. Let's start with Axios. They have some new reporting today, Alon. They say that the peace plan President Trump presented yesterday contained significant changes requested by Netanyahu, which Axios says infuriated Arab officials involved in the negotiations. Many of us watched the big announcement yesterday, Alon, and we were all under the impression that Israel, the United States, and its Arab partners were all aligned on a final plan. Is that not the case?
It's good to see you, Austin. We really have to look at the chronology of the way this plan was presented by US President Trump in order to try to understand who is annoyed and aggravated at which point. There started to be rumors about this plan being surfaced already about a week ago. And then the fact that Trump met specifically with Arab and Muslim leaders, and it wasn't just Arab leaders, it was from the entire Muslim world, included Egypt, Jordan, and Turkey, also included leaders of Pakistan and Indonesia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar. He met with all of them before he met with Netanyahu. That is a deviation from the way the United States has mediated this conflict and specifically this war until now. The negotiators have always been Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. The United States talking to Israel, Egypt and Qatar talking to Hamas, and then the sides talking to each other. This time, the United States went to the Arab and Muslim world first. That really angered Netanyahu and really angered Israel. There was a lot of fear. Trump is in theory agreeing to something with the Arab world and then presenting Netanyahu as a done deal. That's what Netanyahu was coming in with to this meeting with Trump. Then within that meeting, we can talk a little bit about the dynamics, because there was also a few more indications that Trump is not thrilled with Netanyahu at this point. But then all of a sudden we have this counter report saying actually in that meeting between Trump and Netanyahu more got his way. And now what has been published actually is not what the Arab leaders agreed to. So really right now there are rumors that several of the Arab leaders are angry at the way Trump did this. But the truth is Netanyahu was angry at Trump 2 days ago. So it's a push and pull with who's the last person that Trump spoke to. At this point, the plan is still being floated. It's being presented as a one-stop shop and that Hamas just has to say yes. But in truth, when we start breaking down this plan, we'll see that, in fact, this is an opening position for negotiation. So at this point, the Arab world is angry, Israel's angry. They say for a good compromise, both sides need to be unhappy. Theoretically, that's where we are right now, but it's really a question of chronology of when you ask who is the side that is unhappy at this moment.
I think the big two questions right now are how likely is Hamas to accept this plan, and B, when will we hear anything from Hamas? They're still reviewing it, Alon, correct?
So Hamas is reviewing it. They officially got the plan today. They got it through Qatar and through Egypt. Look, it's very difficult to say what's going to be Hamas's response because, first of all, like you and I have spoken throughout the last 2 years, there's a split leadership within Hamas. The majority of the leadership right now lives in Qatar, but there is also the military leadership in Gaza. So both sides would have to agree. There are rumors that are surfacing that the leadership in Gaza has given the okay to the external leadership, saying we'll go along with this if you think so, if you think we should. And Hamas really is at the point right now where it would really not be smart on their end, I'm talking just strategically, to say no, even if they disagreed with this plan. At this point, with Qatar and Egypt, both strong allies of the United States, publicly agreeing to the plan, Hamas really cannot say, no, we don't accept this. This isn't good for the Palestinians. This isn't good for Gaza. That would put them in a position where they would be completely isolated in the world. So I'd say there's a very, very little to no chance that Hamas is going to come back with a no. It's more likely that Hamas is going to come back with a, okay, we accept this, but here are our revisions. And then the question is going to be, how big are those revisions? Like I said, within the plan, there are things that objectively need to be negotiated. The plan is a comprehensive plan, but it says a lot of vague things of what should happen, and they need to be negotiated. Even if Hamas were to come back today and Israel would come back today and both say we agree, this can't be implemented in the next 72 hours. It needs to be negotiated. So Hamas, I'm guessing, will come back with revisions. The extent of those revisions, if it's really negotiating technicalities or if it's a revamping, is going to determine then Trump's response. Is Trump going to look at this as, okay, they've agreed, but they want some changes, just like Netanyahu agreed, and now we just learned from Axios want some changes, that's okay? Or is it, well, they agreed, but they really did not agree? Now, in terms of the timetable, in the initial plan, one of the major criticisms that was surfaced immediately is that there was no timetable for Hamas to actually give an answer. The plan says in it, in a very strange way, I'll say, that it will go into effect, the hostage release, 72 hours after Israel publicly agrees to the plan. It didn't say Hamas has to agree. So Israel had to agree, and then hostages would be released. But of course, Hamas has to release the hostages. That was one of the points that was very unclear in the plan. Today, Trump came out and said, we will give Hamas 3 to 4 days in order to answer. That also is a bit of a vague deadline, and that also tells me the way Trump is looking at this. He's not saying you have 72 hours or, again, the gates of hell, things that he's talked about in the past. Now it's 3 or 4 days. That's more of an indication. Take your time, come back to me with a positive answer. Don't say, well, I gave you an impossible deadline. That's my guess.
So, and again, we have a 20-point outline that was released by the White House yesterday. It was put on social media with this map attached to it. You did a live stream on your YouTube channel yesterday where you went over all 20 points of this 20-point plan. Point number 6 stood out to me. It says, once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. Who might be the receiving countries?
So, this seems very unrealistic on the one hand. On the other hand, like I said yesterday, it's not unheard of. There are lots of cases where terror groups have come to an agreement with different countries to go through a process of what's called DDR, de-radicalization, decommission, and rehabilitation. What that means is that the armed factions agree to lay down their arms, and then they're given amnesty. So you lay down your arms, but you do that on condition you're not going to be persecuted, executed, or arrested. And in turn, the other ones that do not lay down their arms, but also are not permitted, so to speak, to stay fighting, go into exile. In this case, there could be a plethora of countries that would agree to accept Hamas fighters as, just refugees, so to speak. Anyone from Jordan to Qatar, possibly Turkey, possibly Iran, maybe even Iraq. I suspect the United States will try to pressure Iraq into maybe accepting them. But we have to really consider this not as a mass exile of Palestinians. This is basically a way to say to Hamas, to the fighters, you have a way out. You don't just have to fight to the death. One of the critiques that even I was raising to Trump's plan when he was talking about, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza and the Riviera, the Middle East, I said, you can't actually expect Hamas to surrender when what you're offering to them is you surrender and your reward is everyone is exiled and your entire homeland is destroyed. You can't offer that. You need to give people a chance to say surrender, and actually you can go back to living a good life. So that's what that clause 6 is trying to say. It's trying to say, look, Hamas fighters, you have a way out. It might be in your interest actually to do this. You're fighting with Israel, an endless war. It might be in your interest. You will be able to be given amnesty or go into exile as a way to say, if you don't want to commit to peaceful coexistence, then you'll have to go into exile. Of course, I will also add, this has come under heavy criticism already from, I'll say, more cynical commentators, but also a lot of politicians that are saying, well, hold on, this is Hamas. Hamas is a designated terror organization, carried out the October 7th attack, has a long history of, let's just say, not being friendly to Israel. The idea that they will pledge to peaceful coexistence and then the fighters will be allowed to stay, the weapons will be taken away, but they'll just stay based on the fact that they pledged to live in peaceful coexistence is somewhat being ridiculed by some of the more cynical commentators also. That said, I understand where that's coming from. I understand that it's coming from this idea that you can lay down arms and disarm, but will it actually come to the fold, and will there be any level of trust between Israelis and these Palestinians who used to be Hamas fighters, maybe participating on October 7th, now commit to peaceful coexistence, that's already a stretch, I would say.
So you've had a day to take this in, to sit on this 20-point plan. I had a question about point number 6. What are your main questions about the proposal? You say there's a lot of vague language in there. What are your top questions at this point?
So there's a couple of things in the plan that are meant to cater to the needs of both sides. Both Israel and Hamas throughout the last 2 years have really put forth a lot of just absolute red lines and said we're not going to come to complete ceasefire unless these are met. And there's also the factor of the pressure of the Arab world, the different Arab states that also came to Trump and said, we're not going to agree to endorse this unless you add clauses A, B, and C. Among others, there are some facets in the plan that sound like they are hashed out, but in fact, they really are not. In my opinion, chief among them is the question of Palestinian prisoners that will be released. Our clause, I believe, 5 in the plan says that in exchange for the release of the living hostages and the bodies of hostages, Israel is going to release 250 Palestinians that are sentenced to life in Israeli jails, plus 1,700 Gazans arrested since October 7th. And it says, including all women and children. That wording is extremely vague. Are we talking about all women and children arrested in Gaza since October 7th? All women and children also arrested in the West Bank? It's a lot of Palestinian prisoners. The 250 prisoners that are sentenced to life in Israeli jails. Who gets to decide? This is one of the things that completely broke down negotiations in May. Hamas demanded that they will decide which prisoners are released. They want the top prisoners, Marwan Barghouti, Ahmed Sadat. Israel has said, if that is the demand, no deal. This doesn't say. This just says 250 Palestinian prisoners will be released. That's one of the things that really will have to be hashed out. A second thing that will have to be hashed out is the question of humanitarian aid. The plan also says there will be a substantial increase in humanitarian aid and that this will be distributed through the United Nations mechanisms. That includes UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency. That's the main UN mechanism in Gaza. Israel has refused to work with it. It has said that they are essentially allies with Hamas. The plan does not mention the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that Israel and the United States have poured millions of dollars into. What happens there? So those are some of the things that I'll say could be implemented, but still require a lot of negotiations. There's 2 more things that are really big. I'm going to pause for a minute and let you ask a question because I see you taking a breath.
Please, no, could keep on going, Alon.
So there's 2 more things that are really big when it comes to trying to understand where this would be going. One is the fact that there has been a lot of talk throughout the war that possibly the way forward for the famous day after will be that a multinational force made up of the quote unquote moderate Arab states will send their security details into Gaza, that it will be the United Arab Emirates, possibly Saudi Arabia, talk of even Qatar that might send their forces into Gaza. This plan relates that explicitly. It says that there is going to be an international transitory force that is going to be made up of these different Arab states. But it is not clear, first of all, what is going to be their job. Are they going to provide security for the Palestinians? Does that mean that if there's a flare up with Israel, they're defending the Palestinians? Are they going to actually, though, alternatively be an arm of Israel and the United States or the United Nations in order to hunt down Hamas? It doesn't say what they're going to be doing. It just says that they will come into areas that the Israeli military will evacuate. It also says that they are going to train Palestinian police officers that will be vetted and that will be trained by Egypt and Jordan. But it is very unclear who gets to decide their vetting. Israel is going to demand, Israel has said for years, that the Palestinian police force in the West Bank ends up being made up of radicals that can turn to terrorism. Who gets to decide? So the position of that force is something that could be implemented. It's been spoken about for years, but its actual deployment, like going from point A to point B, from the idea that the Israeli military has said it is going to hunt down Hamas to the death, take over the entire Gaza Strip. I don't need to remind everyone how many people have been killed, how many bombs have been thrown into Gaza, to now just say, oh, the IDF is going to withdraw and an international force is going to take hold and everyone will be happy. It's a long step. until everyone is happy and what actually happens. But the last thing that I want to mention before, again, I let you take a breath, the last thing that I want to mention is a clause that has been overlooked, I feel. And it's something that not a lot of people have spoken about. But when I was looking over this yesterday, that stood out to me the most. And it's clause number 17 in what was published in this deal. And it says as follows, very short. In the event Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above, including scaled up aid operations, will proceed in the terror free areas handed over from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, to the International Stabilization Force. That, to me, is the most glaring standing out statement because that says that what Trump is pushing for is not actually contingent on if Hamas says yes or no. Theoretically speaking, this idea that in the areas that the IDF has purged of terrorism, the military will withdraw, the Israeli military, and this international force will come in, and there'll be a scale of humanitarian aid. This clause says, in the event that Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, that's going to go through. Now, I will say, I'm not an expert in international law. I'm a political scientist. So the fact that this has not been not more people are talking about this, I find surprising because if, in fact, that's taken seriously, all these deals, right? Trump and Netanyahu could get on the phone and decide to forget it. If this is taken seriously, that to me is the biggest game changer because what the United States is doing then, it is saying to Israel, it's time to start moving towards the end of the war. Whether you have defeated Hamas or not, whether Hamas has agreed to this, whether hostages are released, it's time for you to start handing over the territory to someone else and to be moving on. That to me is the big headline.
And I'm looking at number 17 right now. What would be the terror-free areas?
Another question that has to then be decided upon. You know, if we pull up the map, usually I have my maps behind me, but not today, unfortunately. So if we pull up the map, so what this map is showing right now is the different areas of control that the Trump plan envisions. But what's important to look at is the first most internal blue line. The most internal blue line right now is the area that the IDF does not control between the blue line and the sea. All the other areas of the Gaza Strip, where there's the yellow line, the red line, all those areas are under IDF control. And theoretically, the military is already purging Hamas from those areas. Within the blue line, between the blue line and the sea, that is the areas that the IDF still has not taken over. So in theory, the terror-free areas are the areas that the military has taken over, has destroyed Hamas's infrastructure, and has said, okay, from now on, this area is declared free of Hamas. But at the same time, who declares that and when? I said that these areas are controlled by the IDF. There is ongoing fighting in the rest of the Gaza Strip, even the areas outside that blue line, every day. Northern Gaza, the areas of Sajaiya, right in the corner of the red line. Southern Gaza in Rafah and Khan Yunis. So theoretically, those areas are supposed to be purged of Hamas, and then they'll be handed over. This plan says once they're purged of Hamas, hand them over. But who decides that? Should that be now or should that be later? So that's just in terms of what are the terror-free areas. Theoretically, it's after Israel has finished taking care of Hamas in those areas. It should hand those areas over, i.e., stop just controlling them in sort of a vacuum right now where no one's in control, but hand them over to someone else. The rest of the lines are supposed to be a staged withdrawal, and that's part of if Hamas agrees and how this happens. But that's in terms of what the terror-free zones are. Again, the big question, who decides that? Israel? Trump? I imagine that he thinks that he will decide that because he's the one who's put forward this plan and compelled Israel to agree. So how that's decided, though, is still a big question.
My final question for you is, let's say Hamas either turns the proposal down or they do delay. The IDF has said, since the beginning of the war, it intends to eliminate Hamas. How do we know when that's been achieved?
So the IDF has come under a lot of criticism externally, but also internally within Israel over the fact that it repeatedly keeps on declaring that the Hamas battalions in the different areas have been defeated. It declared back in June of 2024 that the Hamas battalions in Khan Yunis had been defeated. Yet there was a complete second wave of fighting in Khan Yunis towards the end of September, and they said, well, the units have rebuilt. Similarly, in northern Gaza, the IDF declared that the Gaza battalion had been defeated in January of 2024. Right now, that's where the IDF is fighting, and Hamas has rebuilt. So in theory, Hamas keeps on rebuilding wherever the IDF declares that they are destroyed. Something that we've talked about very frequently is what is total victory over Hamas? Is it Hamas actually collapsing as a government? We're seeing some flashes there now in the sky in Gaza. What is total victory over Hamas? Is it Hamas collapsing in terms of the government collapses and they're no longer in power? Does it mean that there's no more weaponry in the Gaza Strip? That's demilitarization. Does it mean that every single Hamas member is killed? We don't know. What we do know is that the military has openly said two things. One, if there is no deal, it intends to push forward into Gaza City and to gradually take over the different territories and to continue to purge Hamas to the extent that it is managing to do in Gaza City and then in the central camps. But a second thing the military has said is it desperately does not want to do that. It has constantly said to the Israeli government, try to come to a deal first. The hostages are likely held in those areas. We don't want to go in and fight while the hostages are there. First, come to a deal, then figure out what is the next thing that we should be doing. So both those things are being said by the military. And theoretically, if Hamas rejects this, then that's supposed to go forward. If there's no deal, then the military is supposed to push forward. But one of the things we're seeing, again, if we read between the lines of the meeting between Trump and Netanyahu, Trump is starting to, I suspect, feel that he does not want to support this war in an endless capacity. He might give Israel all the backing that he thinks he should give, but he wants to know where this is going. And where seemingly that broke was in that assassination attempt that Israel carried out in Qatar. On September 9th, Israel tried to carry out the assassination attempt. According to reports, Trump was furious and felt betrayed. He had been putting forward another deal, and it was being negotiated. And Israel, meanwhile, tried to carry out that assassination attempt and did this in Qatar, a friendly country to the United States. And where I saw that Trump was angry was in what happened in the Oval Office before this negotiation. When Netanyahu got to the Oval Office, Trump told him to call the Prime Minister of Qatar, and in front of him, Trump lifted the phone and called the Prime Minister of Qatar, handed it to Netanyahu, and told him, apologize for that attack. And the White House has published two pictures of Trump on the phone and of him handing the phone to Netanyahu. That's a scolding moment. That's a parent coming to a child and saying, apologize now for what you did. The fact not only that that happened, but that the White House published those pictures, Trump knows very well how to be a showman. He knows very well the power of publishing different images. The fact that those are the images that were published, I think Trump is trying to show, I'm not going to say, this is nowhere near the Zelensky case of, the humiliation in the Oval Office, but Trump is trying to show, look, I'm supportive, but I'm starting to lose my patience. And I think whether Hamas agrees or disagrees with this, Israel's going to start feeling that also. It's not going to be the endless support that Trump has shown until now.
Dr. Alon Burstein being generous with his time tonight. We appreciate you. He is the host of the Israel-Palestine Report on YouTube. You can go give him a subscribe. Good to see you, Alon. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.